Hey, beautiful people. We're in another beautiful place, delivering some products for a community that doesn't get any, that need them. Thank you so much for your time. This brother right here, what's your name?
Keith.
This is Keith.
Yeah, one of the founders of Food Not Bombs 40 years ago.
We're at the Santa Cruz location, and today, as part of our wildfire relief project, we brought Keith and Food Not Bombs here, a bunch of organic valley milk, and a bunch of Dr. Bronner's. And can you want to talk about a little bit about where it's going to go after we bring it to you?
Yeah, so we do a couple of things. First of all, every day we share food at the corner of Laurel and Front Street in Santa Cruz to between 100 to 150 people, and that number is actually growing. So we've kind of stopped counting. But it's clearly more people. And we also then have the two undocumented worker areas that we take food to, so that they can have access to food, their families. And we've been doing that for years as well. So we have like this pretty sophisticated system of getting food to people who need to be in the shadows, and then people that are the most marginalized. Many of the people that eat with us daily are people that really should be like in psychiatric care, but we are the psychiatric care because it doesn't exist in our county. And so it's a very interesting experience. So it's a combination of housed people who need food really badly, unhoused people, and then people that live outside that are really need like a lot more attention. And so it's quite a stressful experience, but really beautiful experience. And we've been out there 200 and probably 25 days so far. When they stopped the indoor food programs because of COVID, we were only doing Saturdays and Sundays because there were indoor food programs before COVID. And then once those were shut down, we became the food for many of the people living outside. And it's only in the last like 2 months or so that the county and the city has really got it organized to provide food to their own programs. Otherwise, we were also providing food for many of the people that were either in the city and county managed tent cities and stuff. So.
Right on. I'm back here with Keith, and we're talking about some of the things that the government is doing and not doing. And yeah, man, can you go over some of that?
Yeah, so there's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, a federal court in San Francisco, ruled that it's cruel and unusual punishment to arrest people and to ticket them if you don't provide shelter for everybody in your town. There's no place for a person to go. What are they going to do? So the city of Santa Cruz decided they would make a law to work around where you can camp between the hours of 10 at night and 7 in the morning. You can put up a tent on city land, but you have to leave at 7, and you can't have your tent up by 10. And it's clear when they did a little tour around town going from neighborhood to neighborhood to propose this idea that they had no idea that, first of all, people live outside don't have access to electricity, so therefore they'd have no way to plug in a cell phone, and they don't have any idea what time it is. So you're going to expect people just to sit around outside until it's 10 with next to their equipment, being bothered by the police for other things. And there's like this illogic of that. Then there's a soup kitchen that had to shut down because of the pandemic, and they give out bag lunches. And I'll go by there right after it's closed, and people will be like really upset, but there's just this small window of like 30 minutes for people to be able to get the meals. And there's no like thought, and it's a little bag lunch, so people are actually it's great that it exists, but people are pretty hungry. A lot of people will have eaten that meal on the way to our meal because it's like not, it's a sandwich and a granola bar and an apple for a whole day. That's not really much food. So, but there's no like context of like, okay, well, people that live outside don't know what day it is often, don't know what time it is. So when you make like these restrictions, like they have like shelter on demand, which turns out not to be true, but it's advertised for people that are housed to believe that there's something happening, you have to be at this intersection at 5:45 to get into a shelter, which really what it turns out is a referral to ultimately a shelter. And then people just find that it closes down before they even get there. Then people just don't know what's going on because they go, oh wow, maybe it doesn't work anymore, maybe it's not here, not realizing, because they don't have electricity and they don't have a cell phone, what the time is. And it just seems like the people that design all these programs design it from where they're, from the perspective of everybody's got access to computers, access to phones. Another one that really gets me is they make these referral sheets for all these things, and it'll be in the media that we have this referral sheet. And I get complaints all the time from people saying, well, it's like in 10-point type. And you live outside, your reading glasses are probably gone within, within one day, if you even have them. And you can't read it. It's just blurry. And then you've got other people trying to tell you what's on it. And then it turns out that most of the referral locations are places that everybody already knows do not offer any services because they've already tried it all. Like the person to ask about homeless services in Santa Cruz is a homeless person, not a social worker handing out a flyer that gives you a lot of dead ends. And so, the whole way that it's organized is from the perspective of a house person who has access to internet, has access to electricity, and knows what time it is. And if you're organizing homeless programs from that point of view, it's going to be a total failure. And you could see that people are really desperate. The other thing that's really sad is there's a huge number of empty hotel rooms in Santa Cruz, there's an estimate 100,000 empty units of housing in the Bay Area, and the state of California says there's only 50,000 unhoused people. So and many of them are couples and families. So there's more than enough housing. So this idea that we have to build more housing to get people off the streets is also false. The other thing is that we know how to deal with addiction issues. And one of the most important things is to have stable housing. And so there's some very successful programs. For instance, in Berkeley, there's one that's been super successful called, I forget the name of it, but it's a really good program. And the thing is that you go in there, you have 12-step programs, you have medical assistance, but you live there. And you live there for a year. So when you go into a treatment program for 30 days and then you're forced back out on the streets with the very people you were shooting up with, it's not very helpful. And then you also have the issue of a hotel is over $100, often $150 for a cheap hotel in Santa Cruz. Yet you could shoot smack for $20, $40 a day. And, live outside in the horrible elements, freezing cold and so on, but at least you're numbed. And so there's an economics to the idea of why you're a drug addict, is because and then so many of my friends that live outside that do heroin, for example, they got started because they had a back injury. And the reason I know this is I had 2 back surgeries, and I'd go around my walker, and everybody would tell me their stories of their back surgery. And a lot of them were not, were clean and sober and had no problems. But the people that weren't were explained, yeah, I was on Oxy after my back surgery, and then I got cut off, and I was living outside and going cold turkey in a doorway is like a nightmare. So there's heroin is everywhere, so it's easy to get. So I had a friend that died of cancer out on the streets maybe a year ago, and he was telling me the whole story. He worked for Sears. He broke his back at Sears. He didn't get workman's comp in the end. He was on Oxy for the back surgery. Then he went into heroin. Then he got cancer, and then he just died in a wheelchair on the streets in Santa Cruz. So that. And people just don't get, it's not like you were living in a house and decide, oh, I think I'll shoot up with smack now and move to the streets, which is kind of the myth that people hear for decades now. I mean, I've been doing this 40 years, so I've heard so many stories. And I have another friend who was a leading chef in these famous restaurants all over the world. He was in Asia and Europe and so on. And then he came back here because his mom was having some issues. He was born and raised in Santa Cruz. He hated the homeless in Santa Cruz because he was the atmosphere of hatred is really big in Santa Cruz. Then he got a stroke. He ended up on the streets. People started treating him really poorly because he could barely talk. He just stood in his walker all day on Pacific Avenue. I became friends with him, found out about his life story. And he came to eat with us, and then he had to squat in an apartment with another guy illegally for a long time. He couldn't get a hotel room. He finally did after 3 heart attacks and strokes. And he goes, yeah, I mean, now that I've gone through this myself, I can't believe I was mean to unhoused people before, because no one knows what could happen. And he's like, grateful that people, he said, I used to hate food not bombs. I'd see them out there and they're just attracting homeless people to town, and now I depend on food not bombs to survive. And so over the 40 years, I have heard that story so many times, different versions of people who did everything right and ended up homeless, and they'd maybe yelled at me and told me what a horrible person I was because I was attracting homeless people to the community, and then they became homeless, and then they can totally get what was going on. And that's part of the idea of Food Not Bombs, is we're out in public and we're bringing unhoused and housed people together to all hang out and talk, and to see that the people that live outside are not these lazy people that just want to live outside. They all have a story of how they ended up losing their apartment and how they ended up on the streets. And now with 37% of America facing eviction this winter, we really need to have much more compassion, and we really need to start putting people in housing, and we need to start having the governments to stop thinking of the unhoused people as trash, and to start seeing them as the people that live in their community that have built America. Many of the people are construction workers who've injured themselves that now live outside. You know, they might have built your apartment that you're living in, and now they live in the doorway outside of your apartment because they can't afford a place to live because they got injured. And you know, so, you know, it's really time for us to wake up and see that the housing crisis and people living on the street is something that can be solved. We're the richest country in the world, and that's why we got the name Food Not Bombs, is because one less aircraft carrier and you could house everybody, right? And it's like so obvious, but we don't have the political will to stop. Our military budget is greater today than it was when Food Not Bombs started. So maybe we're not successful yet, but if we can get that consciousness that we don't need to be waging wars all over the world, and then having those vets come back and live on our streets, and then demonizing them, and sending more money to build. I just was reading this morning, they've got like a $93 billion nuclear weapons that they're making. Each nuclear weapon is $93 billion. That's insane. One less nuclear bomb at $93 billion, and you could solve the crisis.
As we're here with Keith from Food Not Bombs, I think it's an important story to tell that my own path to service in feeding people started in Hartford, Connecticut in 1995. I got a copy of Keith's book about how to start a Food Not Bombs when I was 15, and did so in Hartford, Connecticut with a group of friends. And I ended up starting another nonprofit in college called Conscious Alliance to focus on Indian reservations with the same concept of food that might go to waste otherwise. There's now a pantry on Pine Ridge, and Conscious Alliance does over 1 million meals a year. From there, started Grassroots Alliance, which is what we're here doing right now in Grassroots Aid Partnership, which is a resource hub from the health food industry to disaster areas and projects like Keith and other grassroots organizations. And all of my path doing this started because of Keith in 1995, 22 years ago. Wow. From Keith's book. So I think it's important to know that young people, when they have exposure to something so positive, like what Keith did with Food Not Bombs, it has ripples. If you think about it, it's like a drop of water in the ocean. And if that drop is compassion, it just keeps rippling outwards, and you'll never know how far the ripples go. But that's another few million meals under, you know, Keith's belt that he didn't even know about.
That's incredible. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks. That's beautiful. Wow.
Poets Park. They have a little community garden. The garden's beautiful. It's good to see, you know, in the city, you know? Lets people know.
Here we go. Continuing on here on the adventure.
That we had all this, but she never got back. She's gonna be shocked when she shows up and all of a sudden there's all this stuff already here.
Yeah, folks, here I am, Santa Cruz bathrooms. It's really great that they've got these out for the homeless and the fire victims. But as you can see, you know, porta potties suck. But it's better than nothing. So thank you for serving Santa Cruz and, you know, just checking out the reality of homelessness and fire victims. We're here at the Food Not Bombs drop point food distribution spot, and proud to serve. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Dropping food and not bombs here, Santa Cruz. We got our little tent set up, handing out some soap and lotion and milk. Getting it. Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, Prince.
Well, the quick pitch is Housing First is a federal mandate through the HUD department. It's how all cities get money for homelessness. And we're under a single paradigm now called Housing First, which means shelters don't end homelessness, housing does. Now that makes us feel really good. Yeah, let's get people into housing. But maybe if you look anywhere on the West Coast, homelessness is mushrooming out of control. That's because the Congress didn't earmark any funding for housing construction. So we have a lot of money, all the money going in redundantly into city after city for programs that create the opportunities for housing, but no actual housing. So we're actually in a state worse than we were 10 years ago with more homeless on the street. So what we do is simply identify the basic unmet needs of homelessness. When you see somebody suffering outside, they're usually carrying lots of stuff in carts, bags, they have to hide it around. It gets confiscated. Also, they're disheveled. So we just said, let's go straight to the heart of that and say, people should have a right to have a free storage program. So we have a homeless storage program, free laundry, showers, electrical device charging, all the donations you might need, and that has transformed homelessness as we know it. We started with the hypothermia shelter where we open up in Santa Cruz for every single person who needs it on the most extreme nights. So we just identify basic unmet needs of homelessness and build programs. We don't get any funding from the city or county. It's all community oriented, and we write small grants, which why I came over to talk to the Bronner's people to let you know what we're up to.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. So with the Housing First model, we pretend we're going to get everybody up housing, but we're not. It leaves most people living in doorways. So what we're about is trying to find ways to raise the floor of experience up to something clean, safe, dignifying for every single person. Part of that is building out a shelter array concept that has the traditional old-fashioned shelter, but everybody gets kind of stamped with the red H in their forehead. It's hard to wash that homelessness off. But there are lots of other new concepts like the transitional encampment that's successful in Eugene, Oregon, Portland, and Seattle, where the cities invest. And it's a sort of encampment model that's very nice and built out, but the people have some investment in their own healing. So look in transitional encampments. And also safe parking programs, lots of different things in every city. Just build that array out, and so that every single person has an opportunity to get off the street if they want it.
Here I am, Santa Cruz Food Not Bombs spot, giving away some lotion, some soap, some milk, talking to some cool people about what they do and how they're doing it here to really combat this situation of homelessness in Santa Cruz and around the country. But really honored to share, but also just looking into ways we can do it the most efficiently and effectively. So continue to serve, folks. There's a chance. We got this. I love the hand washing station. Julia, your masks. Getting ready to go here.
Right?
Santa Cruz.
Julia, we love you. Thank you. We're sharing your love. Look, I'm wearing one right now. And
Right
they take them, they like them.
Which
We
one do you
love
like,
them.
Miss?
I think I want maybe.
Got a good mix of plants here. We got some lentils, which I'm particularly excited about, which along with the Dr. Bronner's tent stands as regenerative agriculture. That's gonna go into my system because lentils work perfectly as a cover crop, as I've heard. Not a farmer, but I'd like to grow lentils if I jump into the field, so.
Oh, nice. I love your bike, JJ. It's cool. That's awesome.
Would have been perfect, huh?
God bless. You guys.
Our last day of service. We're going to finish up today here in Santa Cruz, giving away this last bit of love. We're going to share it with the world, and we're going to jump on the road and head home. We want to thank you all for your support, all your love, everything that you've done, all your service. And for the people who couldn't do it, we did it for you. And we'll continue to do it for you. We love you. Peace. Yeah, there's regular milk. You want some regular milk?
What's up, folks? We just finished out our deployment here in Santa Cruz, and seeing how everybody affects everybody, and how when people have mental illness or they have drug problems, quite often it takes a lot of energy away because you don't know how to handle it, and feeling a little bit like because of that. And also seeing that, may we find a way to understand how to deal with speaking to people and how to deal with their energy so we can see them and be able to help them the best we can. Respect.